In alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. We're continuing with our topic of patience. And right before the class, I asked the students here again to tell me, what does it mean to be patient in life? What does it mean to be able to handle yourself in all situations? And mashallah, the students did very well. Let me see if I can put that up on the screen. You probably can see part of it here. I asked the question, what does it mean to be patient in all situations? And their response was, patience means to remain dignified and calm in the face of hardship without transgressing Allah's limits. To handle your hardship without complaint or panic. And that is the meaning of patience. And then I asked the question, well, what does it mean to transgress Allah's limits? How does a person transgress Allah's limits? Well, the answer is, when you're facing to transgress Allah's limits, is to not transgress Allah's limits, is to face the problem head on without hurting yourself or others. To not transgress Allah's limits is to deal with whatever the hardship is without causing harm to yourself or others, and to not question why that situation is actually happening. So, as Muslims, we are required to remain patient in all situations, good and bad. So whether something is good or bad in our life, I'm going to handle it with dignity, without harming myself, without harming others, without questioning why Allah gave this situation to me. And I'm not going to complain about it. And I'm not going to panic. I'm going to remain calm. That's what patience is. And I hope that's clear with everyone here. I strongly encourage those of you who listen to me to join my classes. It's very important to partake in the quizzes every day, because more information comes out in the quiz than in the lecture. Okay? So, now that we understand what patience is, today what we're going to speak about is how to implement it when you are faced with certain situations in life. Because again, since we are required, we are obligated as Muslims to remain calm and dignified and to not transgress Allah's limits when we're faced with good times and bad. Well, let's go over how we should react when we are faced with certain situations. Okay? And again, we have to understand that at any given moment, you can be placed in a situation where you have to either obey a command of Allah or stay away from something He has forbidden. Or every day of your life, you may find yourself placed in a situation where you have to either accept Allah's decree or show gratitude for a blessing that Allah has given you. So many of us fail these trials. So many of us fail these tests in life. So many of us do not know how to make the right choices. Or so many of us make choices without considering the consequences of those choices. And this is how we end up falling into sin. Okay? Understand, guys, our purpose. We were created to worship Allah. And again, we were put here on this earth to be tested in our belief. Just because we say we believe in Allah is not enough. Allah wants us to show Him through our reactions, through the choices we make here. In good times demand patience. In bad times, it demands patience too. If a person enjoys good health, good security, good power, good wealth, you should never assume that this time of happiness will last forever. And this is the problem that many of us make. We believe just because we're Muslim, Just because we're praying every day, just because we're fulfilling our obligations to Allah, nothing bad is going to happen to us. No, this is not the case. Remember, the stronger your faith, the more Allah is going to test you with it. Okay? We will have moments of good times, but there'll also come moments of tests and trial. When we're experiencing good times, we can enjoy them. We should enjoy them. But understand it's only temporary. You should never allow the good things that's happening in life to cause you to become arrogant or careless in your faith, your practice, or anything else. Okay? So again, guys, understand we were created to worship Allah. Allah put us here on this earth to be tested with good times and bad to see if we believe in Him. Sometimes we'll experience happiness. Sometimes we'll experience hardship. The key is, how do you carry yourself when you're faced with those things? That determines your faith. And so now we have to understand that to implement the patience when you're faced with a hardship, this is better. One of the companions said, the believers and the unbelievers alike may have patience at the time of a hardship, but only those who are strong in their belief in Allah can have patience at the time of ease. Okay, when everything seems to be going our way, that's when we become negligent. How many of you experience this? Your life is going pretty good. So, well, I ain't going to wake up and make Fajr today. I'll make Fajr late. Oh, well, everything seems to be going good. I don't have to make dua. You know, I'm not going to make my sunnah prayers. You know, when times are good, this is when we tend to slack up in our obligations to Allah. But then let something bad happen. Then we'll start, oh, let me start making them sunnah prayers. I'm going to make tahajjud. Oh my God, I'm going through a problem in life, a hardship. Let me get up and make tahajjud. Why weren't you making tahajjud when everything was going fine? See, only those people who are strong in their belief have patience at the time of ease. So many of us, we wait till something bad happens, and now we want to make tahajjud. Now we want to make our sunnah prayers. Now I'm going to fast twice a week. And this is why Allah tells us to be careful of this. Be careful of enjoying too much the good things in life. Allah says in the Quran, and in the interpretation of the meaning, "O you who believe, do not allow your money or your children to divert you away from remembering Allah. If any do that, then they will lose it on their own. O you who believe, amongst your wives and your children are some who are enemies to you, so beware." So here, and you see Allah is warning us in that first verse, don't allow your money, your children, the things you love to keep you away from remembering Allah. So many people, so many Muslims, when good things are happening to them, they don't make their sunnah prayers, they don't fast, voluntary fast, they don't do that many voluntary deeds. But when something bad happens, now they want to turn to it. And in regards to this second verse, where Allah says, "O you who believe, truly amongst your wives and your children are some who are enemies," one of the companions asked Ibn Abbas about that verse of the Quran. And Ibn Abbas told him that this verse refers to some men of Mecca. They had embraced Islam, but when they wanted to migrate to Medina to join up with the Prophet, their wives and children didn't want to go. So they stayed in Mecca for the sake of their wives and kids. Later on, they eventually did migrate to Medina. But by the time they had done that, they were behind the other Muslims. So many Muslims had learned the basics of Islam and were practicing the Islam so well. So the men got mad and they wanted to blame and punish their wives and children from keeping them from moving earlier. And that's when Allah sent that verse down saying, "O you who believe, truly amongst your wives and your children are some who are enemies to you, so beware." In other words, you know, Allah is telling them, don't allow your love. Don't allow your love for your children and your wives to keep you from doing what is best for you. And so many of us do that. There's so many people out there who don't want to give in charity. Why come you won't make a donation to this website? Oh, well, my kids, you know, the money I donate to Sunnahfollowers, that's money that I could spend on my kids, you know, with their lunches for school, or buying my kids some extra shoes or extra gifts, you know, for doing well in school. You know, don't allow your love of your children, your love for the life of this world to keep you from doing good deeds. And that's what the prophet meant when he said children can be the cause of cowardliness and stinginess. So many of us are held back, you know, from doing good deeds because, you know, we feel like this is money that can be spent on our wives and kids. So again, guys, when times are going good, that's when we find it hard to implement patience in practicing our deen. But let something bad happen in your life, oh, you would make a donation to this website without a problem. Let something bad happen to you, you'll send $1,000 to Sunnahfollowers, hoping that Allah will take away your problem. So that's what's meant when the prophet said patience in good times is harder to implement than when times are bad. You know, even when it comes again to praying, it takes patience to carry out our obligations of worship. That's why before we make our prayers or fast or do any act of worship, we have to check our intentions. We have to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. I'm praying not to show off to my family, not to be seen of man, but I'm praying because I want to fulfill my obligation to Allah. I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. And even after we do the action, we have to make sure that we did it the correct way. And that's why Allah tells us in the Quran, in the interpretation, the meaning, "O you who believe, do not cancel your good deeds by reminders of your generosity." It takes patience, guys, to do good deeds like prayer and even fasting for the sake of Allah and not for any other reason. It's easier for us to want to show off. So again, patience. It's harder to implement patience for good than it is to implement patience in evil. We all know the nature of the human being. We are attracted to what's bad and dirty. It's easier for us to give in to our desires and smoke and fornicate and slander and backbite and disobey Allah. But it's harder for us to do what's good. So that brings us to a question that many Muslims ask. Since it's harder to implement patience to do good and easier to implement patience to do bad, then what can I do to prevent myself from doing bad things? Well, the best way to keep yourself from doing bad is to break your habits. And when you break those habits, stay away from people who encourage you to do them. For example, smoking. You know, smoking is a sin. It's easier to smoke than to not smoke. Well, now you decide, I don't want to smoke any more cigarettes because it's haram, it's bad. So stay away from people who do smoke. Just like with drinking. Why would you go around people who drink if you're an alcoholic? You got a problem with pornography. Stay away from pornography. Stop watching pornographic videos and TV. Stop watching things that can lead to those feelings. So again, forsake all those who encourage you to do it or whatever encourages you to do it. Remember, guys, whenever we're faced with a habit, if the habit is accompanied by desires, you're fighting two jinns instead of one. And both of those jinns are trying to keep you away from your religion. So again, guys, how can I implement patience to not do bad? Well, stay away from whatever invokes you to do it. Does that make sense? Somebody sent me an email today asking me a question. Dear Sister Layla, if I'm riding the bus and a woman sits next to me on the bus, do I have to move? Or can I remain seated? We're on a public bus. It depends on you. If sitting next to that woman is turning you on, if you're finding yourself sexually attracted to this woman, if you find yourself getting desires or having the need to want to touch her, then get up and move. But if sitting next to that woman doesn't bother you at all, it's just like sitting next to a cat or something, then you don't have to move. Does that make sense? We only fall victim, no, not only, but we tend to mostly fall victim to our desires when we're faced with things that ignite them. So if sitting on a bus next to a woman is causing you to have bad thoughts about wanting to be with women, to sin, then get your behind up and move. But if it doesn't affect you, who cares? Remember, the strong believer is more loved by Allah than the weak one. Okay? And I hope that's a good example how to implement patience to not do bad things. Simply stay away from situations or people that will encourage you to do it. Okay? That can apply to smoking cigarettes, drinking, doing drugs, fornication. Stay away from people who encourage you to fornicate. Stop hanging around with kafirs who got girlfriends. You're tempted to want to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Stop hanging around with people who got boyfriends and girlfriends and hang around with strong believers. Okay? And what about this? Say you are faced with a situation beyond your control. You can control whether or not you choose to sit on a bus next to a woman or not. But sometimes we are faced with hardships in life beyond our control, such as the death of a loved one. You couldn't control that. Or say your doctor has diagnosed you with a sickness, with hepatitis or cancer or asthma or some type of sickness. You had no control over that. High blood pressure, diabetes. Or say you did get laid off from work. You had no control over that. How do you implement patience when you are faced with situations like that? Well, if you are faced with a situation beyond your control, there's 4 things you can do. There's 4 ways you can deal with the situation. Number 1, you could choose to panic and complain. You can choose to be helpless. Oh, I lost my job. Life is over. That's it. I'm done. Beam me up, Scotty. Stick a fork in her. She's done. And a lot of people act that way. Or you can complain. Oh, I lost my job. Call everybody you know complaining and crying about how you lost your job. That's one way you can behave. But is that the good way? Is that the way we're supposed to behave as Muslims? No, it is not. This is a person who has failed their test. To panic, to complain, to feel helpless. Whenever we lose hope, this is a person who has no longer believes in Allah. We should never allow the trials of life to cause us to feel helpless. Death is something that is inevitable. You cannot prevent it from happening. Sickness. Okay, you've been diagnosed with a sickness. Ask for solutions. Okay, doctor, what can I do to overcome it? So the first thing that many people do is they feel helpless and discontent. You don't want to implement that type of reaction if you are faced with something beyond your control. And by the way, when we talk about situations beyond our control, that includes situations or actions caused by other people. For example, somebody slandered your reputation, or you got robbed, somebody beat you up. You know, these are situations that you had no control over. And then these are injustices that were done to you by someone else. Either you could feel sorry for yourself and be discontent and panic and complain, or you can do this. The second thing, you can face and handle the situation to the best of your ability for the sake of Allah, or as a sign of your strength. You can look at that hardship. For example, your doctor has diagnosed you with a disease, a sickness. Rather than feel helpless, rather than panic and complain, I can look at it like, okay, this is Allah's way of testing to see how strong I am as a Muslim. Am I going to lose hope? Or am I going to trust in him that perhaps maybe he will cure me of this sickness? So I'm going to handle this situation to the best of my ability for his sake. Or somebody robbed your house. They stole your car. I can look at it like this is a sign of Allah testing to see how strong I am. Am I going to bounce back from this? Or am I going to sit here and feel sorry for myself and complain because my car was stolen? So that's the second way. And this is the way a good way to handle yourself. To face and handle the situation to the best of your ability for the sake of Allah, and look at that situation for what it is, a test of your strength. That's a good thing. Also, another way that you can implement patience when faced with something beyond your control is you can choose to accept the situation and make the best of it. In fact, this is a higher status of patience. I'm going to accept whatever bad situation I am faced with and make the most of it. Okay, someone has died. I accept that. I'm going to get over that he's died and move on. Okay? I've been diagnosed with a disease, a sickness. I accept that this is what Allah has decreed for me. I'm going to make the most of my life here on earth. If I only have 3 months to live, if I got 3 years to live, I'm going to make those the best 3 months, the best 3 years of my life, and do as many good deeds as I can. That's the third way you can act. And that's a good way to handle yourself when you're faced with something beyond your control. You couldn't control the sickness. You couldn't control the death of your loved one. I'm going to make the most of this slander. These people have slandered my reputation. They've attacked me. They've lied on me. I accept that these people did this to me, but I'm going to come out of this a winner. I'm going to make the most of this situation. I'm going to come back rocking and rolling. Okay. That's a high form of patience. Or you can handle situations beyond your control this way. You can look at the situation and then think of ways to overcome it while showing gratitude towards Allah for this. And this is the highest level of patience. This is the highest level. I accept the fact that I have been diagnosed with a disease. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to panic. Instead, I'm going to go get second and third opinions. I'm going to educate myself and look for ways to overcome, to get through this sickness. And at the same time, I'm going to make dua thanking Allah for this sickness, because I know that the reason Allah has put this sickness on me is to forgive me of my sins. So I'm going to look for ways to overcome this disease. And at the same time, I'm going to thank Allah for giving me this disease, because this is my chance to earn His forgiveness. You guys see that? Okay, my car was stolen. My home was robbed. I was beaten, or I was raped. I received an email just recently. A sister wanting to know, how do you implement patience if you have been physically molested by a family member, raped? This is a horrible thing. This was beyond your control. Well, I'm not going to panic. Allah decreed this. It did happen. But alhamdulillah, I survived it. I'm still alive. How can I overcome this? What can I do to prevent this from ever happening to me again? Well, I'm going to take self-defense classes. I'm going to learn some martial arts. I'll never trust people that way again. I'm not going to put myself in situations to evoke it again. And by the way, Allah, thank you for subjecting me to this, because I've learned from this. I want to come out a stronger Muslim woman, so that when I have my children, I won't put my children in situations like this. I'll know to have my children learn self-defense. So if they are in a situation of being raped or attacked, they can defend themselves. And thank you, Allah. I know that you did this to me. You have decreed this for me. Not because you wanted to punish me, but because you love me, Allah. And you want me to be able to overcome this and move forward in life. Move on in life, to keep this in the past and move forward, so you can reward me with paradise. See that, guys? That's the highest level of patience. To be able to accept what has happened to you, it happened. Instead of trying to put the blame on yourself or put the blame on someone else, it happened. Now I'm going to look for ways to overcome it and move forward. And I'm going to thank Allah for it, because it made me a better person, and it'll make me closer to Him in the hereafter. See that? It's hard for us to do that, though, guys. Not only is this the highest level of patience, it's the hardest to implement, especially in a case like rape or being beaten or something like that. Okay? And that brings us to another situation. What about this? You're faced with a hardship from the hands of others. How do you implement patience? Someone did a hardship to you. Someone slandered your character. Someone lied on you. Or again, someone raped you. Someone molested you. Someone beat you. Well, you can choose to forgive and forget and not seek revenge. That's a choice. Hard to do. Or you can choose to seek revenge. Or you can choose to accept the decree of Allah, while recognizing that the person who harmed you was the wrongdoer, not Allah. This is great for the case of rape. Allah decrees that whatever happens to us in our life will happen. But understand, Allah wasn't the wrongdoer. The person that did it to you was the wrongdoer. And understand, Allah doesn't place a burden on us too great to bear. Allah chose you and decreed for you that this would happen to you. But He knew that you could overcome it. Allah knows you can overcome this rape and what's happened to you. Allah knows that this trial will make you a better person in His sight and in the sight of others. You just have to figure it out on your own. You have to figure out how to reach that level on your own. That's your test. Are you going to let what happened to you tear you down and keep you living in the past where you can't move forward? Or are you going to let it go? It happened. I'll seek justice. I want that person arrested. I want that person held accountable for what he did to me. But I'm going to move forward in life. He's not going to keep me down. He's not going to be my God. I'm going to move forward. I want justice, what was done for me, but I'm moving forward. I accept that what happened to me happened for a reason. That reason is for me to prove to Allah that I put him even before myself. You may choose to do that. How many of us choose that? Very few. Or another choice you can make when faced with a hardship that was brought on you by someone else is you can decide, well, I'm going to kill this person with kindness. Even though this person did an injustice to me, I'm going to kill him with kindness. And that's hard to do. This attitude has many advantages, which only Allah knows in entirety. For example, say somebody slandered my character. They lied on me. They slandered me. I could get angry. I can react in a different way. I can choose to forgive or forget. But you know what? When I'm going to choose to, even though that person lied and slandered me, I'm going to still go around that person. And every time I go around that person, I'm going to be nice to them and kill them with kindness. Make that person feel so bad for what they did to me. I'm going to make that person hold himself accountable for the lies, for the slander that he issued against me. So those are several ways you can handle yourself when you're faced with a hardship as a result of what someone else has subjected you to. Okay? Finally, for today, and this is important, there are some situations that we may find ourselves faced with in life due to our choice, but the consequences end up being more than we can bear. So as a result of this, we find ourselves faced with problems that are way hard to overcome because we made the choice to do something without thinking of the consequences. For example, smoking cigarettes. You chose to smoke cigarettes for whatever reason. Now, 20 years later, you diagnosed with emphysema or lung cancer. You didn't think about the consequences. Or another example, love, the four-letter word that destroys so many. You chose to fall in love with that person without thinking about the consequences. Okay? This happens to many of us, guys. And the way to avoid putting ourselves in situations like this is to simply always think of the consequences when we are faced with a choice in life. Whenever you are faced with the choice to do something, to fall in love with someone, to smoke a cigarette, to even go start a job. A lot of times we start jobs and don't think of the consequences that the job might be a bad one for us. Always think ahead. Try to picture the consequences as to whether or not this decision or this choice that you made is going to backfire on you. Because you may find yourself having to implement patience for something that's beyond your control, like cancer, but you brought it on yourself. So Islam teaches us to always think ahead before we commit an action, to think about the consequences. There's always consequences to the choices we make. Either the consequences are good or they're bad. Weigh it. Weigh the consequences. And that's how you prevent yourself from falling into a situation of which is unbearable because of a choice you made. So thus, guys, I want you to think about what we discussed today. I'm going to give you a quiz on this tomorrow. I'm going to give you different scenarios of different people in different situations. What would be the best way for them to handle themselves? For example, if I find myself faced with a situation whereas a person slandered me, how can I best implement patience in regards to that? Or I find myself in a situation where someone that I depend on and love has died, or I've been diagnosed with a disease, or I lost my job. You know, what's the best way and the worst way to handle myself in that? So make sure you guys listen to the lecture again. Also, watch the PowerPoint when I place this up on YouTube, so that tomorrow you can come in here and take the quiz and do well on it. So we'll stop right here. If you guys have any questions or comments, inshallah, you can go ahead and type them on the screen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka